What's up? My name is Jordan Mitchell, and welcome to the Shrimp Society. Today, we recorded a podcast with Jonathan Dunsmore. He is a lawyer that specializes in securities and blockchain. And so we kind of just sat down with a chat to get an overview and some of the basics around crypto, Web3, NFTs, and how that relates to the law. This will probably be the first episode of the Shrimp University section of our podcast, which aims just to be an educational resource in the Web3 NFT space. And if you are unaware, the Shrimp Society is the hub or community of builders, creators, innovators in Web3, built off of a tech community that's been running in Miami since 2017. We're trying to take that to the world with IRL utilities and digital experiences to connect people who are actually building and making stuff. But that's enough advertising for now. Without further ado, welcome to the Shrimp Society.
I'm attorney Jonathan C. Dunsmore. This is all educational information. None of this is legal advice, investment advice, or financial advice. I got into this space many years ago, back in 2016, when people were looking for securities lawyers who understood blockchain and were trying to get ICO or legal opinions out of us. Unfortunately, at that time, I recognized most of these ICOs, if not all of the ICOs, were securities. So we turned them down left and right, unfortunately. And then we finally had someone who, basically kind of questioned me and say, well, how would, we register securities on a blockchain and what would that look like? And I said, that's a good question. I kind of fell down the rabbit hole there. And things got really weird, and they continue to get weird. As it relates to space, it's one of those situations that is ever evolving because you have some of the smartest people in the world working on it. And so it becomes this weird kind of opportunity for people to, continue to grow and advance technology that is not well understood by regulators. And NFTs are just kind of a primary example of that. They've kind of become this weird new world of non-fungibles, and while non-fungibles have been around a little while, back since they really took off during the CryptoKitty days, but non-fungibles have existed for a little while, but the use cases weren't there. But now that we've developments of all these platforms and making it easier and easier to mint NFTs, it just has kind of really taken off from a marketing and advertisement and artist point of view.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned, to take a step back, kind of one of the first things you mentioned is how a lot of these ICOs, when they were starting out, were securities.
Yeah.
And you had to turn them around or turn them away. For somebody who has zero legal background at all, can you just explain a little bit what that means? What is a security and what are those implications?
Oh, that's such a good question. So when something is deemed a security by the SEC or even a state regulator, that means you have to fall within certain restrictions because back in the day, pre-1933, it was the Wild West of investment contracts. So under the Howey test, it's a 4-part test. It's an investment of money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profit and solely from the efforts of others. So that analysis is what, unfortunately or fortunately, is the standard for the securities world. And if you are a securities or your token falls within the securities framework, that means you have to be regulated. And what form of regulation that takes depends on what form of investor you have. So if you have unaccredited investors, that's one type of position to take, and they have different restrictions and things of that nature. Or if they're what we call AI or accredited investors, they can invest in damn near just about anything they want because they're rich folks. Yeah, that's kind of the underpinnings of ICO world.
Interesting. And something like I apologize if this is bouncing around, but I'm just gonna basically be following my curiosity as you speak. But something that I've heard a lot about is DAOs, excuse me, DAOs, and the implications of having a ton of unaccredited investors pooling funds together. So, from your lens, like what are the implications of that? What should people be looking out for, um, like in regards to DAOs and being unaccredited investors? Like, are there any key things that you know there, or things that people should notice or know?
Yeah, DAOs are complicated, right? For the very reasons that you just stated. It's not well understood within the marketplace of how these things should be regulated, or to what degree should they be regulated at all.
Mhm.
If they're acting as a cohort to make investments, or something like that, then yeah, things can get a little sticky. And I have a love-hate relationship with DAOs, quite frankly. I'm a part
Mhm.
of several DAOs. One that's a group of lawyers and legal engineers who are trying to figure out what the law looks like on a blockchain.
Mhm.
But as it relates to DAOs in general, we're just scratching the surface. I mean, if we're what almost 12 years into blockchain, or into Bitcoin now,
Mhm.
we've got a solid probably 10 years before we understand what DAOs are, and how they're related. I believe that one of the fundamental principles of a DAO is to have a one-to-one vote, meaning one wallet, one vote kind of thing.
Mhm.
And now some of the tech gurus can say that, oh, I can create 1,000 wallets and easily manage it, but it's not truly easy, overall and long term, and doing a chain analysis of who actually owns those wallets. So
Mhm.
it comes down to managing expectations. If this is a group of people who are coming together to have a little clubhouse kind of thing, that's one thing. It's another it's another situation altogether if they are trying to possibly do something nefarious, or even something that's
Mhm.
kind of skirting the law, like some of these investment DAOs that, like I said, kind of make me nervous.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is the question that I asked you in New York. But I guess I wanted to go into it again and deeper. And this can kind of be taken on two levels of like a project and of just an individual themselves. But maybe starting with the individual, what's the biggest thing that you notice in the whole NFT or Web3 space that like that practically like somebody needs to pay attention to or read about or just know? Like where do you think people like that biggest gap of knowledge is from a legal perspective?
That's a great question. I'm still just trying to get people into the Web 2 space, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the answer is. I think that there is such a large disparity right now between technology and normies, and the average person, and we're already overwhelmed. So I can't really say, oh, be sure to pay attention to this kind of stuff. Like it's
Yeah.
gonna permeate their existence regardless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for better or worse, Web 3 is going to show us, what we are as human beings. Web 1 and Web 2 have shown us a lot. We've learned a lot. I've hoped, as a overall planet, have kind of grown from it. I think that while COVID and the last presidential cycle have shown that some of us are way more susceptible to misinformation and disinformation than others. I
Mm-hmm.
think the advent of Web 3 can help curtail a little bit of that. If we can start proving sources without having to identify them, if we can start verifying documents without having to show an entire lineage of evidentiary holdings, I think that we can get into some really exciting opportunities to possibly create a more democratic framework. That being said, I do think that we're going to see the worst of the worst in Web3. I think that, with NFT gating and all these other kind of things,
Mhm.
we're going to see a lot of really dirty things kind of go down, whether it's Silk Road or child exploitation or, human trafficking. All these kind of terrible things are going to still exist,
Mhm.
and they're going to be harder to kind of track down. And that's why, for the blockchain space, um, it's going to be really important that we all kind of work together and not work with bad people, but
Mhm.
also try to develop an ecosystem that is open, honest, and friendly.
Yeah.
Blockchain has kind of always been that way. We've always kind of been us against the world, but at this point, there's starting to be a lot of money coming back into it. And so, anytime there's a lot of money, there's always a lot of scammers, and we've seen that most recently, of course, with the NFT space and
Yeah.
everybody and their mother trying to drop NFTs for, that look like famous NFTs or that look like other people's works or something like that. So everybody's always trying to make a quick buck, but I'm hoping that, with the development of Web3, we can actually kind of grow an entire population together.
Yeah, those are great points. I guess I don't know if this is from like a legal perspective or regulatory or from the community. What do you think are some steps that you're looking at that should be taken to kind of mitigate those negative aspects? Do you think there's anything that can be done, or is it just something that's inherent in the infrastructure of Web3, so can't really be tackled? I don't
I
know if
think
that.
part of it's inherited, right?
Mhm.
Like if I can, if any human can act like a monster and not have repercussions, then people all of a sudden feel like they can get away with things, and they continue to kind of press the edge, right?
Mhm.
And so, with a fully decentralized metaverse type of experience, you're going to have opportunities to do really terrible things. Some of those will bleed over into the real world, and some of those will just stay on the web. But I'm hoping us as a society, once again, have will start to evolve to the point where we don't have to worry about everyday human resources, and hopefully we start handling climate change a little bit better. But if we can just maintain a solid stabilization of life, of basic life, I think that we'll start really kind of growing as an overall society. And I think that Web3 is going to be, really at the forefront of that, because there is not going to be a way that a government can shut it down once, most of the ecosystem is up and running. Now
Mhm.
there's arguments that telcos and things like that could shut off service, and I think that's always going to be the case of something being shut off. But I think, as we've seen with certain Bluetooth technology that will allow for messaging relays, those types of systems, or a possibly truly decentralized web, without the need of telcos or without the need of big conglomerates,
Mhm.
may be possible. And if it does, and if it is, like I said, we are going to see the best and worst of people. But I think if anybody's trying to get into this space, and now's the perfect time, regardless of your age, regardless of your religion, regardless of your sex, regardless of wherever you've come from, now is a good time to get into this space and learn it. Whether you're an engineer or a hacker, or who knows, whatever your skill set is, there's a place for you here. And I hope that people who are interested in making a better life, or having fun and doing really kind of crazy and exciting things, recognize that this is the gold rush of our age.
For sure, for sure. Earlier, you mentioned some of the things that are exciting you about like information, um, and how that relates with blockchain. But what are some of the big areas that excite you the most in Web3? Either projects that are coming or just have use cases that you're looking to.
I'm really excited about the same thing that I'm frightened about. I'm scared of closed off ecosystems that focus on terrorism, or like I said, exploitation of humans.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also really excited about having people who have not had that type of freedom before in the world experiencing it, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that their government can't shut it down, or being in a position where you can speak freely or you can talk openly about LGBTQ type, issues, or discuss religious freedoms openly in a public, digital square kind of thing. Those are where I start seeing, the advancement of human society, because the internet has been great for the people who can access it. And that will always be a problem, right, of access. And so if we can create greater access, and then we can, possibly prevent that access from being corrupted, at least at the, macro level, right? The micro level things can still be screwed with. But if we can, disallow China's, great digital wall, then we can have, possibly more free and fair elections. We can have access to information that is critical for human life. We can share information that, could possibly lead to cancers being cured, all these other kind of fun things. And whether that is, something that occurs because of Web3 or in spite of it, I don't know. I'm excited, but I'm also, like I said, kind of terrified that we're going to start seeing a lot of bad things happening. We're going to start seeing, people exploiting the hell out of it because they can. And, for better or worse, we are just monkeys in clothes.
You mentioned there, like, for example, the digital wall in China, and a big central part of the Web3 ethos is that everything is decentralized. And so when you're looking at countries or borders, this is a question from Shiner on Twitter, but what geographical jurisdiction has legal authority over like purchases of NFTs or DAOs or just the decentralized blockchain in general? How does that work with like a decentralized system and then these centralized governments?
Yeah, so I mentioned this last week at NFT NYC to some people. If you're the only known member of that DAO, they're going to go after you. If there's only 5 of you or 10 of you or 1,000 of you, and you're doing something that draws that much attention, they're just going to go after you. They're regardless of who it is or what it is, or all those kind of things. So one of the fundamental principles of DAOs right now is almost anonymity. And that gets scary, right? Like that gets a little weird because there are bad people out there. There's, not everything is rainbows and sunshine in certain parts of the world, and you got to be careful. And so it becomes a situation where the tools that we create are only as powerful as the systems in which we create them for. Do I think a decentralized internet will last long in China? Probably not, because they'll shut down the telcos, or they'll figure out a way to ban it. Do I think that if there was a decentralized internet that rose up around China, that China could not eventually force it to be integrated into its system? I think so. I think there's a strong likelihood that if we have a global decentralized internet, no government is safe, and that's when the power is really to the people, and we start getting to see what true democracy looks like, and which people swallow the misinformation and disinformation and which ones don't. But I do hope that we can learn from DAOs, and that we can possibly create a more democratic system, one that's not just governed by 2 parties and lesser of 2 evils kind of decision. I'm hoping that over the course of the next 10 to 20 years, we start seeing this stuff implemented in our real life, and having an NFT that shows I am who I am, and here's all my historical biographical data information, will allow me to vote anywhere in the world. And if that occurs, then we can start really kind of doing elections at a really kind of easier pace. Sorry about that. We can start doing elections, anywhere in the world, and we can start actually taking advantage of opportunities at the local level as well as the national or international level.
Yeah, that's a idea that I've kind of heard mentioned, like the idea of using blockchain infrastructure to run governments. Do you think that will ever be a realistic possibility where a government like votes on chain, or whether it's like an established chain or their own version, but where they can have those on-chain governments for like an actual country or an actual jurisdiction? Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, Estonia's got a lot of that foundation already laid. It's
Really?
not well utilized in the sense that, most people aren't talking about it. And I believe it's built on Ethereum, so it's a little bit slow and costly.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, if everything goes well, I think that, the internet was inevitable, and I think blockchain is inevitable. We need to be able to verify things without having to, dig up their history or their legacy. And doing that on chain or using a reliable system for that makes sense, especially as we start, possibly becoming an interstellar communication, or excuse me, an interstellar community, right? Like it's going to be really tough to make sure that that message is the exact message that we receive from Earth if God forbid something happened.
Hmm.
And that's where we start, really kind of building upon all the things that we learned in Web 2. What are the information that we need to, guard against? What is the things that how do we identify bad actors? Well, we know most bad actors, or there's two types of bad actors. There's the types that stay anonymous, and there's the types that don't. And just because someone stays anonymous doesn't necessarily mean they have bad information. It just means that, they may be willing to, kind of protect themselves for other reasons. And so we kind of have to drill down on it and really kind of build a system that makes sense. That's why we need everybody who can code and everybody who can't code, because this is not just an exercise for, the technical gurus and the STEM people. This is an exercise in philosophy and religion and politics and everything else. It's all framed in art and NFTs and funny little admission tickets and things like that right now. But what we're building is the same things that, back in the day were just considered. Who's going to use a website to order their food, or
Hmm.
Uber? Who's going to use uh, who's going to use their phone to get into a stranger's car and have them drive them somewhere? Like that would have been
Yeah.
unheard of 10 years ago, and now it's the norm. Now we don't even bat an eye, and if anything, it's become kind of the standard conditioning.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that what you brought up about everybody having to be involved is big. I was reading a book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by
Yeah,
Yuval
yeah,
Noah Harari.
yeah, yeah.
And a lot of that was kind of before this big blockchain boom, but he talks about most of it's machine learning, but how philosophers are going to be a profession that's highly valued, which for a long time hasn't been the case. But just because there's so many new technologies coming up and so many new ethical dilemmas, we need to match that innovation with like philosophy and with ethical questioning and with those deep insights into our human nature and not just what we can do.
I think that's spot on. I think it's going to start being a situation where if we don't start, looking at the bigger picture, we're going to start building systems that we don't need to build to oppress people we don't need to oppress. And whether that's intentional or not, I don't know. I think sometimes we get lost in the statistics and we get lost in the analysis without, looking at the fundamentals of, why are we doing this? Is this, actually working? Do the statistics show that anybody else is being harmed from it?
Mm-hmm.
And so it does become this, philosophical argument of, who and where and what and how does all this stuff work? And some of it, like I said, we have answers to, and others, we're going to have to leave that up to those philosophers.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna swing it, excuse me, to another question from Twitter from Luis, and his is about real estate. He says, "How can one go about buying real estate, putting it in an NFT, and fractionalizing
Man after my heart. Um, So that's the ultimate goal that I want. I want to be able to look online and find a cool place in a cool location and just buy it.
Hmm.
Sight unseen, all that kind of fun stuff. Ideally it'll have an inspection report, and the insurance carriers are reward against some stuff, but how they don't reward against much. So we've got to rework insurance for the 21st century as well. But we're getting to that. But yeah, Louise is absolutely right. In theory, depending on your jurisdiction, you can do that.
Hmm.
You can do that now if you've got a brokerage license and things of that nature. That's one of the things that I've looked at exploring.
Hmm.
But it's not well understood in the marketplace right now. Even after all this time, people are like, "Wait, what do you mean? If I buy this, I actually own the place?" Like, it becomes really, really crazy. And there's a good chance that you might start seeing some of that before the end of the year. There's a good chance that in the next couple years it will become the norm, because recording deeds and all the other kind of basic things that involve real property are really, really easy on a blockchain. It's almost comical how easy, but we've
Yeah.
got to reform like 7 different systems. We've got to reform systems at each county level, which is, for those
Hmm.
outside the United States, we have a state, and then each state has a bunch of counties in it. And so each county is different. Each county has its own local laws, which is just ridiculous. And it works, back in the non-digital era, but
Hmm.
now it's the 21st century and people move a lot, and people try to find new gigs, and life takes them places. And so it should not be so difficult to buy a house, or buy a condo, or buy whatever, than it is. It should be as
Yeah.
simple as going on to Amazon and saying, that looks cool. I like that location. You possibly buy the entire thing outright if you have that kind of cash on you, or
Yeah.
crypto on you, or it becomes something where eventually the mortgage people will be able to look at your digital wallet and say, okay, we believe you can afford this type of mortgage.
Hmm.
um, those types of things are going to exist in this Web3 world.
Interesting. And when we talk about fractionalizing, I apologize like if this is something that you already spoke about, but when like let's say well I guess like a relevant example is, have you seen Constitution DAO?
I don't. Oh, is that the one that's selling like parts of the Constitution or something?
Yeah, I think like Sotheby's is about to list a original version of the Constitution, and they want to buy it and fractionally distribute it, I guess. But from like for something like that where people are fractionalizing collectibles, or even what this guy asked about with real estate, in the law, like like who does the law say owns that? Is that like a DAO that sets up an LLC? Like what how would you even put that down onto paper that all these people own it, um, from a legal perspective?
Oh, that's such a good question. It really depends. That's sadly the
Mm-hmm.
worst thing about crypto is it depends. We truly believe that when you start fractionalizing something, unless you fall within an exemption, you're probably a security, just because of the nature of the way fractionalization works.
Yeah.
Now there's questions of, can you fractionalize DAOship, or can you have ownership, or can a DAO own things? Well, a
Yeah.
partnership can own things, and a partnership is basically just two people agreeing to do business under common law. And so that's kind of what DAOs are. They're kind of just
Mm-hmm.
this giant partnership. But as I was saying earlier, partnerships have like severe liability issues. So
Yeah.
if one partner, does something egregious, the other partner can be sued and be held fully accountable or liable for that.
Yeah.
And so it becomes something where, once again, like I said, if you're a prominent person in that DAO, they may go after you and just say,
Yeah.
well, you have to go after everybody else for their share. And so while I love the idea of people coming together and actually buying things and sharing in enterprises and stuff like that, I think we're very far off for understanding how some of this stuff works, especially for physical stuff. It's one thing if we're all sharing a digital, NFT that's got, that's been placed in a multi-sig wallet, and we have different people who have different parts of the key, and they're
Yeah.
trusted and all this other kind of stuff. But then at what point does the trust erode, or God forbid something happens to that person, and they've lost part of their key? It really becomes an exercise, and how do we build a better future? It's
Yeah.
not theoretical anymore. There is reality in it. I think that part of the Constitution should be owned by the people, but where the hell are we going to store it? How is
Yeah.
any of this going to work?
Yeah.
Is it going to be something where there is a national treasure like heist on it because it's in some guy's basement? um we don't know. And I think that's the things that, like we were talking about, we've got to get more people in the space. We've got to get more people thinking about it and talking about it, because it really does matter. It doesn't come down to beeps and boops. It comes down to human evolution.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And wait, I just had a really interesting question off of that. Um, oh, my mind just went blank. I'll come back to it if I remember it.
No
Oh,
worries.
this was it. This was it. Um, if like is do you think blockchain records will ever be, or like maybe are they now something that's admissible in a court of law as record for something? Because on the one hand, it is verifiable, but on the other, it's just wallet addresses. So is that something that you can, like, if there was a situation where you were a part of a DAO, could you point to like a blockchain agreement that somebody signed as something to clear your name, or to show I didn't act as a part of this whole entity, there were others involved? Like, is that something that has happened yet or could happen?
It hasn't happened to my knowledge, but yeah, I mean, there's absolutely, a smart contract is still just a contract, right? And so you have to go through the analysis of what's in the contract, and if there's not much in the contract, then you have to either resort to common law, or you have to look at what was the intentions of the parties. And so when you're dealing with anonymity, it's really tough to figure out what intention was, right? So, unfortunately, there's not a cookie cutter answer with just like most of this space, because it really depends. Does everybody who's contributing to Constitution DAO have, an ownership right in the Constitution? Well, presumably, if that's what, they're either investing in, or buying to save, or however they're structuring
Mhm.
it, right? But if one person, or the majority votes to, like I said, keep it in some guy's basement in Jersey, like, how does that work for the rest of them?
Yeah.
They voted no, but then when the thing's stolen or damaged, or whatever, who's liable? Who's going to sue who, kind of thing. And as for us lawyers, it's always about who has culpability or liability. And I think that it becomes this ever increasing risk module of, it's one thing to be, um, completely anonymous for talking trash on Twitter. That's
Yeah.
fine. If everybody believes the avatars on Twitter, then you probably have some problems.
Yeah.
But if you're listening to an avatar reporter, or someone who's supposedly spouting news off at you,
Yeah.
and you take that as gospel, and don't do your own fact checking, or read any other possible contrarian sources, then we can start getting into some really kind of scary cult like behavior. And we've seen
Uh,
that with the recent political upheaval, but we've also seen that with the meme stocks and everything else. Those people are diehards. They
yeah.
know the system's broken, and they're damn sure willing to bet, in some cases, their life savings to prove it.
Yeah.
And so, while that's incredibly admirable, you want to make sure that these people are protected. And I don't think right now the best protection is the government. I think the government
for the most part, needs to continue its kind of laissez-faire attitude with some of this stuff and let us play in our little sandbox and see, what we create, what we break, and things like that. I think that most people won't get burned. I think there will be some people who, experience rug pulls or God knows what this Constitution DAO is, and if they'll actually, buy it. Right? I don't know if it's represented by anybody, and that comes down to, one of the bigger points in the space is that I try to joke with these DAOs that you should at least have a lawyer. I'm not trying to solicit more work because I don't need it. But there's plenty of really competent lawyers out there that understand or are trying to understand DAOs because they fascinate us. And so having somebody you can rely on and all pay or whatever is really exciting, because then they can say, okay, we reasonably believe that this will be handled properly. You're raising $4 million to buy a copy of the Constitution. Well, do we want to verify that this is not going to be or that the account with Sotheby's has been set up, that we've verified that we have a custodian to take it and put it in a safe warehouse after it's been purchased. Like all of these kind of basic things that eventually could be proven on chain aren't there yet. So we have to rely on the old systems.
Yeah, for sure. That's really super interesting. Uncharted territory for sure. I'm gonna throw it back to another question from our community. Jay Wolf in Discord. Here, I'll just read it out. It's a bit long, but hopefully it makes sense. But my NFT project sets up a revenue share agreement between music artists and distributes revenues to fans. How do you hold artists liable when they're paid in fiat for their music and need to pay back their funders in crypto? And that's like the first half of the question.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, we don't know, right? The bank account's not on chain. There's not blockchain-based payments. You know what I mean? We can't see that Spotify has cut them a crappy royalty check. And so, we don't have those systems yet. You have to rely, as I was just saying, on traditional third parties or ideally, and this is not to advocate for lawyers. I quite frankly hate most lawyers. But I think that, lawyers are at least some of the people who have law licenses on the line and they can find us. One of the reasons that security attorneys like me get to cuss on phone calls is because if I'm wrong or you misunderstood or you lie to an investor, we both go to jail. We both get in trouble. And I don't look good in orange. So, screw that. I'm not risking it. So I do think if we had more trusted third parties in the mix, that would be really helpful. If you had a CPA who was authorized by the DAO to look at the account and square up everything at the end of the month, and then have a lawyer who's authorized to basically sue on behalf of the DAO if the account's not square and that person doesn't want to square up. Those things really matter. Those are the kind of people you have to utilize in the real world and hold them accountable for the DAO.
Okay, interesting. And I think this is another question that you kind of answered earlier, but maybe just like a quick addition to it. But when does a smart contract need off-chain legal intervention? And do you envision a world where everything is performed via smart contract?
I don't see a smart contract overcoming everything right now. I could see it being utilized at its most basic form for contract management, saying, okay, this is, the correct version, things like that. It was sent. It was signed. Things like that are very easy, very well understood within the marketplace. I don't see us at least for the next 4 or 5 years, really kind of digging deep into, how to write a full contract on, probably a layer two, right? We wouldn't use a
Yeah.
layer one. Um, but I don't think we're there yet. I think we've got
Yeah.
some time. Um, as it relates to, his other question, I think that, I think everything is digital until it's not, right? If there's a dispute between two people, someone missells a punk or an ape for the wrong price. Well, what did the contract say? Well, we didn't have a contract. We just had, text messages or emails or whatever, or DMs. Like, okay, well, some of that may be a contract, right? Like, it's in writing. And so if we piece through that, and somebody was supposed to send, 40 ETH, regardless of the price of ETH, it was 40 ETH, and they sent 40 ETH, but ETH collapsed the day before. And they got a, God forbid, 50-60% discount. Then hey, that is what the contract says. And I do think that, the more we can kind of focus the digital world on executing on smart contracts, especially for, interactions between two parties, the better we get, the more experience we get at, kind of figuring out how these things operate. Because, everybody's got multiple wallets, everybody's got, multiple accounts, and different chains have, different wallets and all this other stuff. And so it does become a complex mess of, who's sending what, where's, what going. And everybody sent something to the wrong address before. And so, we've really kind of got to hammer all this stuff out before we start, dealing with, as Lewis was saying, like real estate. Like, you don't want to have an NFT that's on Ethereum, go to a Binance wallet address and then having to unpiece that transaction. Like that's not where we want to head. We want to move forward and not backwards.
For sure. I guess to wrap up, one question I have is, are there any resources that you use for or can recommend for people who want to learn more about the legalities of NFTs, whether it's people you follow on Twitter or like podcasts or Discord channels? Where do you go to learn about these things?
From the legal side of things, we have to like kind of talk internally, and all the lawyers have, various working groups of trying to understand this stuff, because we want to provide competent legal counsel to our clients. So there's not really a Bible per se to, go to, look at that and see what the NFT is. I think if you're doing anything involving fractionalization or something, you need a lawyer, you need to talk to somebody. If you're involving with anything with IP rights and giving those away, probably need to talk to a lawyer, an intellectual property lawyer, and have no problem referring people to other people, for all this kind of stuff, because it is important, especially if you're working on larger and larger projects, which some of these are. But yeah, I mean, overall learning, I think, it really depends on what the person is trying to learn and how the person is trying to learn. Some people are really prolific readers, and reading is how they get their information. Other people, prefer watching videos, and I think the space in general is really good with videos. So YouTube, unfortunately, is one of the best resources to see how various dApps or apps work, and how to, properly set up a liquidity pool or something like that. So it really kind of becomes something where, what are you trying to learn, and how do you, best comprehend the material, and then just kind of dig into it. There's no really, rhyme or reason once you understand the basic fundamentals of a wallet, a centralized exchange, a decentralized exchange, all that kind of stuff. I think that it starts kind of just like anything, building upon itself. And so once you have the foundations down, there's not really much you can't build in the weird world of blockchain.
Yeah, for sure. And something that just made me think of is, like you said, there isn't really a Bible on this yet. And like, I feel like one of the best ways to learn is just by building, even if you're not an engineer. Like this conversation, for example, there's nothing stopping you from starting a podcast and diving into learning whatever it is you're about. There's a ton of people in the Web3 space looking to help. And so I guess that's just a thought or realization that I had. If you have questions, there's a ton of people here to answer them. And I guess last question, or if you're open to sharing, where can people find you? And is there anything that you're looking for help with, or things that people can do to help you?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't really need anything right now unless somebody has something really cool they want to show me. I'm always, game for that kind of stuff, or they've got a legal question that nobody can find the answer to. I'm always game for that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, this space is ever evolving. So the best way to generally reach me is through social media. I have Twitter, Jay Dunsmore Esquire on Twitter, and then I'm on LinkedIn for those that use LinkedIn. Those are generally the two best ways to get at me. I think my DMs are open on both. So, just message me, ask me what, your question is. If I can help, I can help. If I can't, I'll shoot you to somebody who can help. It's not a situation in which I want to be the right person to go for everything. I just want to make sure that we're all kind of moving forward together. This is a big enough pie for everybody, and there's so much work to be done that there's no way in hell we can all do it alone. So it's just, we need help. We need a lot of help.
For sure. All right. Thank you so much. This was super insightful. And thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Let me know if there's anything I can do. And this is going to be great.